Welcome to The Coach Approach, NSWC Carter Rocks podcast for maximizing your personal and professional growth. I'm Jamie Wilson, Carter Rocks Coaching Program Manager. Join us each month for The Coach Approach to hear leaders at all levels shed light on what coaching is and the amazing benefits it offers. Listen as they share their personal testimonies about how partnering with a coach was transformational by using self-reflection to discover hidden talents, higher potential, and even obstacles that once prevented their forward movement. So whether you're ready to go to the next level, seeking a promotion, or want more self-confidence, the Coach Approach is the right place for you. Joining us today is Mr. Kermit Jones. Kermit is a Navy Chaplain in the reserves and is experienced in executive coaching and leadership development. He will be talking about how coaching has personally impacted him and answer the million-dollar question, why do I need a coach? Kermit, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. So, would you like to start off with sharing your personal testimony about how coaching has impacted you?
Hi, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be with you. And of course, I'd love to. I've got a couple of different instances when I think coaching has really hit me square between the eyes. And the reason I find this is that coaching is a reflective process a lot of times where powerful questions are used to help us see things that we sometimes can't see on our own. That kind of gets to our million-dollar question in a few minutes. But for now, I think the one that probably got me to me most is I had an issue. I was in charge of a program. What's one of the biggest things that when you're in charge of a program that you're always fighting for in the government? It's almost always the budget. It's right. It's the money, like, right? And I'll never forget, it was near the very beginning when I first was introduced to coaching as a whole. This is several years ago. And I was working with a guy. He was a master certified coach, and he offered me a free session. And I mean, who's going to pass up on that? I mean, he normally charged like $300 or $400 an hour. And I was like, great, I'm in. So I'm getting ready to go into this meeting. And oh my goodness, I'm still laughing thinking about it. But I'm getting ready to go to the meeting, and he says, Kermit, describe to me the scenario. I said, well, I've got to go fight for my budget, and it's me versus them, and they're trying to like not let me have my money, like, right? I'm trying to make this impact on Marines and their families, and yada yada yada. And he says, if you could describe it as a metaphor, like what would it be? And I was like, well, it's like I'm the knight going in to slay the dragon, like, right? And I'm picturing myself with a sword, and I've got the helmet on, and we talk for a few more minutes. I really get into this metaphor, and he just goes, "Have you considered that you might be someone else's dragon to slay?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, I mean, it just like I remember like it was like one of those movie things where the world kind of slows down, the motion. I can remember sitting at my desk as he asked the question, and it really hit home for me because the reality is, I hadn't really stopped and considered the other person's point of view and what was taking place. And so I was kind of like, I don't have time for that, Marcel. Like that was the guy's name, the coach's name. And I said, so I've got to go to the meeting. So I go to the meeting, and it was epic. I mean, it was like battle royale, but it was lined up in such a way I couldn't have scripted it even better. I mean, like the fight, the argument, the discussion got to the point that other people at the table are like, why are we even having this conversation? Like, I mean, just let him spend the money the way he wants to spend the money as the program director. And the person that was kind of I was against really kind of got shut down. And I walked out of there with my chest puffed out, my head held high, grateful that I was able to save my program and save the money.
Wow.
So same day, like, right, second coaching moment, I'm driving home, and I work in a personality assessment called Four Lenses. It's a preference-based personality assessment that looks at emotional intelligence and what drives us from our preference perspective. And I'll never forget, I was talking to the CEO of the company at the time, and I'm in my car, and I'm like, it was amazing, it was epic. Well, Four Lenses deals with this idea of maturity, and the first question is, where do your actions align? Were they low or high mature actions? Like, were you focused on the impact to yourself or the impact to others? And I'm like, are you kidding? Of course it was high mature actions. Like I saved the program. This is Marines and families and all these things going on. And the second question, though, it also looks at this idea of your motives. And he just asked the question, well, which wall were you facing? And in that moment, like, he didn't have to lecture me. He didn't have to say anything. I knew that even though I had done the right thing, my reasons were not honorable, let's say. And I remember I was literally pulling into my driveway. I was in New Orleans at the time, living in Belle Chase. And as I was pulling in my driveway, again, the world just slowed down. So twice in one day this had taken place, this time dilation. And what I realized was even though I had won the fight, I had burnt bridges in the process of doing that. And that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I want to be known as. I've been accused of a lot of things, but I do value others. And it brought me back to that conversation earlier with Marcel. I was so concerned about slaying the dragon that I didn't realize that, yes, I was someone else's dragon to slay, but at the end of the day, they weren't really a dragon. And so the next morning I went in and had to immediately start rebuilding bridges that if I hate to say it, if I'd listened to my coach, then I probably wouldn't have been there. But I had to go back and repair some bridges and just kind of say, hey, look, I don't apologize for what I did. I apologize for how I went about it. That I could have maybe had an offline conversation or a less public conversation, or I could have done something to get to the yes, but in a more positive way. And so that was really in this moment of when I was trying to, like, I think coaching is this thing I want to do. And I think I want to go in that direction. Like, no kidding, that was the thing that hit me. That was the impact that a coaching moment has had on my life. As far as coaching itself, I had just gotten certified in a tool called Immunity to Change. It's by a bunch of Harvard guys, guy and gal, Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. Anybody listening, if you go on YouTube and type in Immunity to Change Lisa Leahy, you'll see an hour YouTube of her doing it. It's a phenomenal tool. And I got done with the conversation and I'm talking to the person teaching, and I said, how do you make a living doing this? And she says, well, I go in, I sit down with leaders. And now when she says leaders, she means like multi-billion-dollar companies, like global, like, right? She sits down with their CEOs, because I mean, ITC was developed by these Harvard professors. They've got this different type of credibility to it. She sits down with them. She says, I work with them for a couple of weeks. Some of their major issues are resolved. This insight that they have, and they go, hey, you get us. We should put you on payroll. And I was like, oh, well, that's a great way to work. And so immediately that night, I'm having this conversation with another coaching group, and they're like, hey, we've got a spot in our upcoming cohort. Are you interested? And I was like, am I interested? Like, holy cow. And so all those things transpired. This is like the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I just remember thinking, I'm not a dummy. At least I don't like to think I'm a dummy. Like, right? I got some credentials. My wife would argue too that some of the most educated people we know are some of the least smart, which that's kind of ironic. But the reality is that in this formative time of coaching, and I'm trying to figure out, like, how does coaching work? What do you do? The impact that it was having on me, having been coached a couple of times, just really kind of threw me for a loop. And so I kind of had this reckoning that, yeah, if I can use coaching, if it can have this impact on me, how much more impact could it have on others if I was using it intentionally? And so that's the long and short of it.
I love it. I love it. It's great. Powerful. And coaching is powerful. It's powerful and transformational. It's done more for me than I could ever talk about in a short 15-minute time frame. So I can definitely relate. So if I were to come to you and say, Kermit, why do I need a coach? What would you say?
My first answer is almost always you don't. And people go, wait, I thought you do coaching. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, right. So I think this really comes down to the underlying knowledge of why is coaching, like, valuable, or what is coaching. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have this mindset that coaching is a remedial thing. Oh, you're struggling with this thing, we're going to send you to coaching, right? And so
you're right, they do.
That is such a low view of the potential of what coaching does. And the reality is that I always tell people, I mean, you're right. I mean, Tiger Woods doesn't need a coach at all. Like, right? Michael Jordan didn't need a coach. Oh, wait. Some of the greatest people in the sports of what they do have coaches, not because they suck at something or they're bad at something or they're being remedial, but because they're already high performing and they want to get better. And so what I tell people is, you don't need a coach, but you should certainly want one, unless you're telling me that you're the greatest version of you ever that could possibly exist. And if anybody tells you that, the definition of that's called a narcissist. Right. I mean, like, if we're being honest, but the reality is that when people say who needs a coach, I say, well, no one and everyone. Like, right. We all have an area we either want to excel at or we want to get better at. And
always room for improvement, right?
Yeah, always room for improvement. And the fun part about this conversation is I'm a huge fan. When I was first introduced to the idea of leadership development, I was actually, the Navy, like, right? The Navy introduced me to it at the Naval Academy. But fast forward, I got introduced to a guy named John Maxwell. And John Maxwell's a big leadership guy. And he has this interesting conversation. He says, we focus in our society on weaknesses. Matter of fact, if you look at almost any performance eval of a federal employee or DoD employee, it's always bring your 3 greatest weaknesses, your 3 greatest strengths. And what do people focus on? Well, we need to work on these weaknesses. We need to shore them up and, get you some training on them. And I'm like, that's a horrible approach and very pessimistic. It's like if a kid comes home with a report card that has an A and 3 B's and a D. Every parent on the planet almost always focuses on what first? The D. Like, right? They go straight for the D. And I'm like, whoa. What if you focused on the A first? What if you said, hey, wow, tell me about that course. What did you enjoy about it? What principles can you learn? Like, and then once you have that assessment, you say, how can we apply those principles to manage the D? But not necessarily like I'm not trying to turn my D into an A. And this is where I think where people struggle, because this is what John Maxwell says. On any topic, you can improve by a 2 with about 40 hours of work and a couple $100. Maybe now it's a couple thousand, but back then it's a couple hundred. Yeah. And so if you're a 3 or 4 in something and you make it to a 5 or a 6, no one cares. You're average. But if you're a 7 or an 8 and you can become a 9 or a 10, people pay for a 9 or a 10. They pay attention. Matter of fact, think of the golden person, the golden child in your organization that can do no wrong. You're on the backside, like, looking at all the things you're doing wrong, like, right? They're completely forgiven all those things. Leadership overlooks all the negativities because there's usually 1 or 2 things that they do so well. They've created this indispensableness or whatever that word is that I'm looking for. They've become a genius in this one area, this 9 or 10. And so that's where I like to work with people on coaching. Exactly. I mean, yeah, you can have the negatives and you can have the low numbers on things, but if we can take the high numbers and we can really excel at those and make those better, then things become amazing. It also reminds me of a story when I was a young chaplain, and so realized that as a chaplain, I'm an 03. I'd been in the chaplain corps for a very short time because we pretty much started a higher rank because of education. Not that matters, but I'm an 03. I'm assigned to a ship with an 06 or a full bird, and aside from the executive officer and the senior enlisted leader, I'm the only person as the chaplain that gets to walk in and say, sir or ma'am, you're doing it wrong. That doesn't go too well. Like, right? I'll never forget the CO one time said, I don't have to run everything by the chaplain. I said, yeah, but I got to run everything by you, sir. And he says, I haven't needed a chaplain for 24 years in the Navy. What makes you think I need one now? And I just looked at him and said, well, evidently the Navy, sir, because that's why they assigned me to your ship. Like, so I wish we could assign everyone a coach, but the thing about coaching is it needs to be kind of voluntary. But well, that was a sideline story. So everyone needs it, like, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of different types of leaders that are out there, though. There's the leader that thinks that they don't need any external help, and then there's the leader that doesn't have confidence that what they're doing is right, or maybe they're so concerned about their people that they want to make sure that the things that they're doing are having the maximum positive impact. And the beauty of coaching is that coaching gives you a sounding board from a person that's outside of you.
Yes.
That isn't telling you what to do. And this is where I think, like, people often confuse coaching with consulting or mentoring.
Therapy, yeah.
or counseling, and this is a super short version that's unfair to a lot of descriptions, but counseling looks at the past and how it's impacting the present and how do you fix it. Coaching looks to the future.
Yes.
And how do you get there from the present using your path? So then we look at the other tools. Well, mentoring is this is how I did it. Consulting is this is how you should do it. Coaching looks at, okay, based on your skill set, your path, what's the best path for you? And so coaching partners with someone. It's not that the coach is this expert in your world. People are like, how do you coach a multi-million-dollar CEO if you've never been a multi-million-dollar CEO? Well, I don't have to have been a multi-million-dollar CEO to ask questions.
Right.
And yeah, and I've actually found that typically when the coach has very little knowledge about the world of the person, their client, that actually becomes an asset in many instances because they're able to show up with genuine curiosity.
Absolutely. And this applies not only to leaders, but also to, employees within the organization, to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
an interesting study. It's one of my favorite studies of late. It's from 2021 by Rice University. It's in the International Journal of Evidence-Based Coaching and Mentoring. And it's Rice University, and it's the impact of professional coaching on emerging leaders. If you get a chance to look that one up, it's great. But this is students, so university age students, which is the primary average age of the military, which I find interesting. Students who worked with a professional coach compared to those in the waitlist group exhibited larger changes, and I love this, larger changes in leader identity, self-concept clarity, humility, because what good's leadership identity if you don't have humility, right. Sense of purpose, and satisfaction with life and psychological stress. So there's these psychological impacts, but leader identity and humility. And the thing that amazes me is that change was not seen in people who simply took leadership classes. It was seen in people who worked with a leadership coach. Because the coaching is about application of these principles that we learn. I can take all the leadership classes or read all the books in the world, but if I'm not questioning how am I applying that to my world, they do nothing. And that's what a coach does. A coach just gives a sounding board. They partner with the client to have this sounding board of, hey, what's going on here? Why did you do that? Or explain the thought process and what's taking place. And does that align with who you see yourself as being? I do a lot of faith-based coaching as a chaplain, and I tell people that as a Christian coach, I help people gain clarity on who they are and who God is calling them to be. Now, you may be listening, or people may be listening. They're not faith-based people. That's fine. The reality, though, is that what is your purpose in your world? Does you, that's not a great way to word that, but do you align? Does your person align with who that calling is or what that purpose is? And most people that I talk to, when they really become honest with me, the answer is no. I'm not living up to my potential. I'm not living up to what I think I could be doing. That's where coaching comes in. So you're either a perfect 100% in all things, or maybe you should consider having a coach. That's kind of the answer that I would give to that one.
That's that self-discovery of those blind spots and those hidden obstacles they weren't aware of.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just sometimes it's a matter of someone that's willing to kind of be frank with us. Exactly. We always say that iron sharpens iron. As iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. Well, okay, yeah, that's true and fine. And people will say that they want to sharpen the saw if we're using Covey language, but the reality is that very few people, maybe I should word it like that, very few people actually want to be sharpened. Because when iron sharpens iron, you get friction, you get heat, you get sparks. It's unpleasant. It's very painful. Like, right, you got to prune a bush in order to bear more fruit, but pruning sucks. Like, right, it's literally lopping things off. And so a lot of times coaching becomes this anvil, iron sharpens iron. Sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. And so what I find is that if you're not strong in your own identity, you may struggle with a strong coach. The coach has to match the client. And I tend to work with people that are very high performing, very entrepreneurial, very demanding leaders of themselves first and then their people. That's the kind of leader that I work with specifically. Not everyone is my client. And I recognize that because if I see you doing something that doesn't align with your good leadership, I'm going to ask you, hey, does that align with your good leadership? And by asking the question, people will almost always give an honest answer. That's the funny part. But if they don't have someone there to ask the question, they miss the opportunity to become a better leader. And I think that the problem that I see a lot of times in senior leadership, and we're here for DOD kind of stuff, but in senior leadership in the federal government, is leaders are surrounded by yes people. They're surrounded by people that are afraid to ask hard questions. They're surrounded by people that won't challenge them. And it's not that they are just yes people around them. It's that we feel this obligation. And I've been on staffing one time where the admiral mentioned something in passing, and so immediately they go away, and the staff's like, oh, we got to research this topic, and I'm like, why? Like I'm that guy, like, right? Why are we wasting our time on that? Well, because he may ask a question in the future, or she may ask a question in the future, and I'm like, so me being the chaplain, I can get away with a lot of things. I just go knocking on the door, and I'm like, hey, Admiral, like, yeah, I don't mean to waste your time, but did you want people to research this topic? And they're like, no, why would I want that? No. I was simply thinking out loud, right? And I'll never forget the chief of staff goes, you're not allowed to do that at this level, sir. Like, right? And it's just, everybody in the room is like, that was awkward, like, right? But the fun part about a coach is you can think out loud. Like you can think about, you can soundboard stuff, and it doesn't have an impact on the organization other than you have a sounding board that you can have this conversation in. It's not a vacuum. I don't want to word it like that, but it's a safe space. We talk about that term a lot. It's a space where you can actually have a conversation without repercussions. Maybe that's a better way to word it.
Right.
Because if you're talking to the best XO or the best senior leader on the planet or chief of staff, like they still bring baggage of the relationship or the expectation. And so a coach doesn't bring that baggage. A coach gives you space to have a conversation without the baggage. And what I find is that a lot of leaders, now I have talked to some leaders that are like, I don't like working with my coach because I'm done. I have a to-do list at the end of the conversation. And I'm like, well, I mean, so there's things you should be doing or not. And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, if you don't know that up front, then you need a different coach. So,
or you're not committed and not ready for coaching.
Right. Or maybe you really don't want to get better at what you're doing. So that kind of comes into play. But really, if someone has a bad experience with a coach, I would simply say, okay, so back up and go try again. Go find a different coach. Go try and find a coach that aligns, and be very clear in the beginning. Like, what are you trying to get out of the coaching relationship? Right. Are you trying to get a list of things to do to improve? Or are you trying to get clarity on like who you are and who you need to be moving forward? Because that's going to naturally impact everything you do. So back to the original question, like who needs a coach or why should I get a coach? No one and everyone. You shouldn't. You should. I mean, don't get a coach if you're just going to waste time and go through the motions. Get a coach if you're no kidding serious about, I want to perform better. I want to get better. I want to be a better leader. Like real coaching. Let me rephrase that. Good coaching, and this is where I'll reference a model that we use in one of the classes I teach. A lot of coaching deals with behaviors, actions, environment. That's not where powerful coaching takes place. Powerful coaching takes place when we talk about values, choices, beliefs, identity, vision, calling, vocation. Like good coaching digs deep into those conversations. The environment and the actions is so secondary. And yet, when I listen to coaching conversations, and I do mentor coaching and that kind of stuff, probably 80% of coaching deals with those. I'm going to do this thing, these actions. That's such a low level of coaching. That's not the impact that a lot of leaders are craving. Leaders want coaching conversations that deal with like, who am I as a leader, and how is it aligning with my philosophy of leadership and who I am and what I'm called to do, and the impact it's having on people. Like that's a different conversation with the coach than this area sucks, and I've got this person that I work with, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with them. Like, right. And so I think that part of it just becomes really looking deep at like, what type of coaching am I seeing or approaching? Because that kind of changes the answer too on who needs a coach. Well, I mean, depends. Who are you trying to be? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's going to change the recommendation on some of that. But
that's exactly right. Yes. Gosh, thank you so much. So I really appreciate you taking the time again to share your valuable insights with us today. So, and I would also like to thank all you listeners out there for joining this episode of The Coach Approach, brought to you by NSWC Carter Rocks Coaching Program. If you want to learn more about coaching, visit NSWC Carter Rocks Coaching Program SharePoint site. If you want to request a coach, contact Jamie Wilson at 301-335-0492. Thank you and have a great day.